Let me tell you something from a woman's perspective that most men completely misread. When a woman starts fading on you, less responsive, less available, pulling back, here's what you think is happening. She's lost interest and it's over. But here's what's really going on in her mind. She's having an invisible internal debate. A 5-stage psychological process where part of her still wants to give you a chance, and part of her is protecting herself. And if you don't understand this process, you'll make the exact mistakes that close the door permanently. I'm going to walk you through all 5 stages of what's happening in her mind right now, and show you exactly where the window of opportunity is before it closes forever. Here's the truth from a woman's mouth. When her interest starts to fade, it's not a simple switch that flips off. It's not black and white. It's not, I loved you yesterday, now I don't. It's a process, a psychological journey she goes through internally while you're on the outside trying to decode every text, every tone, every delay. And here's what you need to understand. During this process, she's battling herself. Part of her wants to hold on to what you have. Part of her wants to protect herself from more disappointment. Part of her hopes you'll change. Part of her knows she needs to let go. She's conflicted. And that conflict plays out in 5 very specific stages that most men completely miss because they're too busy panicking or chasing or trying to force conversations. By the end of this, you're going to know exactly which stage she's in right now based on her behavior. You're going to understand what's going through her mind at each stage, and most importantly, you're going to see where the window of opportunity is, and how to keep it open instead of slamming it shut. This isn't about manipulation. This is about understanding her psychology so you can respond with strength instead of desperation. Let's start with stage 1. The moment when the first doubt enters her mind. Stage 1. The first doubt. This is the moment when something shifts inside her mind. It's usually triggered by a specific moment, a disappointment, an unmet expectation, or a pattern she's started to notice. Maybe you said you'd call and you didn't. Maybe you've been less present lately, taking her for granted. Maybe she opened up about something important and you brushed it off. Or maybe it's not one big thing. It's a dozen small things that have been building up, and suddenly she's noticing the pattern. Here's what's going through her mind at this stage. Is this just a bad moment? Or is this who he really is? Am I overreacting? Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But this doesn't feel right. She's questioning herself as much as she's questioning you. And here's what you need to understand. At this stage, she still wants to believe in you. She's not done. She's not checked out. She's hoping you'll notice. She's hoping you'll step up. She's hoping this is just a phase and not a pattern. That hope is what keeps the door open. But here's where most men mess this up. They sense the shift. Maybe her texts are a little shorter. Maybe she's less enthusiastic about plans. And they panic. They start chasing. They start over-texting, over-explaining, asking what's wrong 10 times a day, demanding reassurance. And that panic, that desperate energy, it confirms her doubt. It tells her, he's not grounded. He's not secure. He's reactive. And it pushes her deeper into stage 2. Here's how you recognize stage 1. Pay attention to these behavioral signals. She's still responding to you, but there's less warmth. Her texts are shorter. She's not initiating as much as she used to. When you make plans, she says yes, but there's less excitement in her voice. She's pulling back just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough for you to feel it. And internally, she's watching you. She's testing whether you'll notice the shift without her having to spell it out. She wants to see if you're emotionally aware enough to pick up on her energy change. She wants to see if you'll adjust your behavior or if you'll keep doing what you've been doing. This is the most critical insight about stage 1. She's not pulling away because she's done with you. She's pulling back to see how you respond. She's hoping you'll show up differently. She's hoping you'll prove her doubt wrong. But if you chase desperately, if you get needy, if you start bombarding her with attention to try to win her back, you lose. Because you're confirming exactly what she's starting to fear. That you're not the grounded, emotionally secure man she thought you were. So here's what you do instead. You notice the shift. You don't panic. You give her a little space, but you stay consistent. You don't withdraw completely, and you don't chase desperately. You show her through your actions, not your words, that you're still the man she fell for. Calm, present, self-assured. That's how you pass stage 1. That's how you keep the door open. Now, if you don't handle stage 1 correctly, she moves into stage 2, and this is where the real internal battle begins. Stage 2. The hope versus protection conflict. This is where her internal battle intensifies. If stage 1 was the first doubt, stage 2 is the war inside her mind between two competing instincts. Part of her wants to give you another chance. She's thinking, maybe he'll realize what's happening. Maybe if I pull back a little, he'll show up differently. Maybe he just needs to see what it feels like when I'm not always available. But there's another voice, the protection side. And that voice is saying, I'm setting myself up for disappointment. I deserve better than this. If he hasn't changed by now, why would he change later? I need to protect myself before I get hurt even more. And here's what makes stage 2 so confusing for you. She oscillates between these two sides. One day, she's warm and engaged. She's texting you first, laughing at your jokes, making plans. And you think, okay, we're good. Whatever was off, it's fixed. But the next day, she's cold. She's distant. Her replies are short. She's suddenly busy when you try to make plans. And you're left thinking, what did I do? What changed? Here's the truth. Nothing changed. She's just swinging between hope and self-protection, and whichever side is winning that day determines how she shows up with you. This is the most frustrating stage for men because her behavior feels unpredictable. But it's not random. It's her trying to figure out if you're worth the risk. She's evaluating. And what she's evaluating is your consistency, your emotional stability, and whether you chase when she pulls back or stay grounded. Here's what you need to understand about stage 2. She hasn't ended it yet because part of her is still hoping. She's hoping the man she fell for, the version of you that made her feel safe, excited, valued, is still in there. She's hoping you'll notice her withdrawal and step up without her having to explain it. She's hoping this is temporary, not permanent. But every time you react desperately, every time you panic when she goes cold, every time you demand to know what's wrong, every time you try to force her back into warmth, you feed the protection side. You prove to her that you're not the grounded man she thought you were. And that shifts the balance. So here's how you recognize stage 2. Pay attention to the hot and cold patterns. One moment she's responsive and present. The next, she's pulling away. She'll text you enthusiastically one day and barely reply the next. She might agree to plans but then cancel or reschedule. She's testing you through silence, through distance, through inconsistency. And internally, she's watching. She's asking herself, does he stay calm when I pull back? Does he give me space, or does he chase? Does he get needy and insecure, or does he stay confident and consistent? Here's the critical insight. At this stage, the window is still wide open. She hasn't made her final decision. She's in conflict, and conflict means there's still movement. but which direction it moves depends entirely on how you respond. If you stay grounded, if you don't react to her hot and cold behavior with panic, if you give her space without disappearing completely, you keep the door open, you show her that you're still the man she wants you to be. But if you chase, if you demand answers, if you try to control her emotions, you push her further into protection mode. And once she fully commits to protecting herself, she moves into stage 3, where the testing gets even more intense. Stage 3. The testing phase. This is where her internal conflict becomes external behavior. She's no longer just oscillating between hope and protection in her own mind. Now, she's actively testing you to see which side wins. Here's what you need to understand about this stage. Testing isn't rejection. It's evaluation. She needs to know if you're emotionally grounded or desperate. She needs to see if you're the man she thought you were, or if her doubts are justified. And the only way she can know for sure is by putting pressure on the dynamic and watching how you respond. Think of it like this. Anyone can be calm and confident when everything is going well. But testing reveals your true character under pressure. And that's what she's looking for. Who you are when things aren't easy. So what does testing look like? She pulls back to see if you panic. She creates distance to observe your reaction. She becomes less available, slower to respond, vague about plans, suddenly busy when you reach out. She's watching to see if you'll chase desperately or stay grounded. Sometimes the test is silence. She stops initiating. She waits to see if you'll bombard her with messages or if you'll give her space and maintain your frame. Sometimes it's emotional. She brings up something that bothered her to see how you handle it. Will you get defensive? Will you over-explain? Or will you stay calm and address it without falling apart? Here's what most men don't realize. Every response you give during this stage is data. She's keeping a mental scorecard. When you chase, that's a point against you. When you stay calm, that's a point for you. When you panic, she feels confirmed in her doubts. When you stay grounded, she starts to question whether she's been wrong about you. And here's the critical part. This stage is the peak opportunity for reversal. Why? Because she's still engaged. She's still watching. She hasn't detached. If she didn't care at all, she wouldn't be testing. She'd just be gone. The fact that she's testing means part of her wants you to pass. She's hoping you'll show her the emotional strength she needs to see. She's hoping her doubts are wrong. But here's where most men fail. They interpret testing as rejection. They feel her pulling back and they panic. They start over-pursuing, over-texting, demanding to know what's wrong, trying to force her back into connection. And that desperate energy, it confirms everything she feared. It tells her, he's not the man I thought he was. He's needy, insecure, reactive. So what does passing the test look like? You notice the shift. You don't ignore it. But you also don't panic. You give her space without disappearing completely. You stay consistent in your behavior, not chasing, not withdrawing, just steady. You show her through your actions, not your words, that you're emotionally grounded, that you're not shaken by her distance, that you trust yourself enough to let her have space without falling apart. When she pulls back, you don't chase. You match her energy. You stay calm. And when you do interact, you're present, confident, unbothered. You're not trying to win her back. You're simply being the man she fell for in the first place. That's how you pass stage 3. That's how you keep the window open. But if you fail the tests, if you chase, if you panic, if you prove her doubts right, she moves into stage 4. And that's where guilt and self-preservation collide in a way that makes everything even harder. Stage 4. The guilt battle. This is where things get emotionally complicated. For her, she knows you care. She knows you're invested. She can see that you're trying, and part of her feels terrible about pulling away. Here's the internal conflict at this stage. On one side, there's guilt. She's thinking, am I being unfair? He hasn't done anything terrible. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm the problem. I feel bad for stringing him along when I'm not even sure anymore. But on the other side, there's self-preservation. And that voice is stronger. It's saying, I need to protect myself. This doesn't feel right. I deserve to be in a relationship that feels good, not one where I'm constantly questioning. If I stay just because I feel guilty, I'm doing both of us a disservice. And here's what makes stage 4 so confusing for you. She doesn't end it cleanly. The guilt prevents her from delivering a direct rejection. Instead, she fades gradually. She makes excuses. She says she's busy. She's stressed. She's overwhelmed. She apologizes for being distant but doesn't change her behavior. Why does she do this? Because she's hoping you'll get the hint. She's hoping that if she pulls back enough, you'll either step up and transform into the man she needs, or you'll naturally drift away on your own. And then she doesn't have to be the bad guy. She doesn't have to hurt you directly. She doesn't have to have that uncomfortable conversation. Here's the truth. Most women hate confrontation when it comes to ending things. It's not manipulation. It's avoidance rooted in guilt and discomfort. She doesn't want to hurt you. She doesn't want to be the villain in your story. So she fades, hoping the relationship will just dissolve without her having to pull the trigger. And in her mind, she's rationalizing it. She's telling herself, if he really understood me, he'd see this isn't working. If he was the right person, he wouldn't need me to explain. I'm giving him chances to step up. If he doesn't, then that's confirmation I'm making the right decision. So here's how you recognize stage 4. Pay attention to the guilt signals mixed with distance. She apologizes for being unavailable but stays unavailable. She says things like, I'm sorry I've been so distant lately. I've just been overwhelmed. But nothing actually changes. She makes vague future plans, we should hang out soon, but never commits to a specific time. She's polite, maybe even kind, but emotionally detached. And here's what you need to understand. At this stage, the window is still open, but it's narrowing. She hasn't fully decided yet. The guilt means she's still considering. If she didn't care at all, there would be no guilt. She'd just be gone. But here's the critical part. If you respond to her guilt with pressure, if you guilt her back, if you demand clarity, if you make her feel like the bad guy she's afraid of being, you accelerate her exit. You remove the guilt and replace it with justification. You give her the reason she needs to walk away without looking back. So what do you do instead? You give her space. You don't guilt her. You don't pressure her for answers. You stay calm and grounded. You show her through your actions that you're not falling apart, that you're not dependent on her validation. You let her sit with her own conflict without adding to it. That's how you keep the window open during stage 4. That's how you give the guilt side a chance to swing things back in your favor. But if she fully commits to self-preservation, if the guilt fades and only protection remains, she moves into stage 5, the final evaluation. And that's where the window of opportunity either stays open or closes for good. Stage 5. The window of opportunity. The final evaluation. This is it. She's at the decision point. Stay or go. All in or walk away. Here's how you know if the window is still open. She still responds to you. Even if it takes time. Even if her replies are short. She responds. She still accepts plans. Even if she reschedules. She still asks about your life. She still shows occasional warmth, even if it's inconsistent. Those are open window signals. Here's how you know the window is closed. Consistent one-word responses. Never initiates. Not once. Avoids all plans. No exceptions. Complete emotional detachment. She's already planning her future without you in it. The difference is engagement. Even minimal engagement means the door is still cracked. Zero engagement means it's locked. So what's the tipping point? What transforms her from conflicted to done? Desperation. Neediness. Emotional outbursts. Demanding answers. Forcing conversations she's not ready for. Giving ultimatums. That's what slams the door shut. That's what gives her the clarity she was missing. It tells her, I was right to have doubts. But here's what keeps the window open. Space without disappearing. You give her room to breathe, but you don't vanish. You stay consistent in your life, your energy, your purpose. You don't chase, but you also don't punish her with silence. You're just steady. You focus on yourself. Not to make her jealous, but because you have a life beyond her validation. You improve. You grow. You become the version of yourself you've been meaning to become anyway. And when you do interact, you show up differently. You're not needy. You're not resentful. You're present, confident, grounded. You're the man she fell for, or the man you should have been all along. That's the reversal strategy. That's what makes her think, wait, he's different now. Maybe I judged too quickly. Here's the timeline reality. This window typically lasts 2 to 4 weeks. Maybe longer if the relationship was long and deep. But it's not infinite. There's a point of no return. That point is when she mentally detaches. When she stops wondering about you. When she starts making plans that don't include you. When her future vision has no space for you in it. You can't negotiate your way back from that. You can't logic your way back in. Once her heart and mind are truly gone, no amount of chasing or changing will matter. So here's your strategic position during this window. Be the man she hoped you'd be. Not the man desperately trying to prove himself. Not the man begging for another chance. The man who's grounded, improving, living his life, with or without her. That's the only position that has power. That's the only position that keeps the window open. Now you understand all 5 stages. You know where she is. You know what's happening in her mind. And most importantly, you know what to do. Here's what you need to remember. When a woman fades on you, it's not simple. It's not instant. It's a 5-stage internal process, from the first doubt to the final evaluation. And during that process, the window of opportunity exists. But desperate behavior closes it. Chasing closes it. Pressure closes it. What keeps it open is understanding, staying grounded, giving space, improving yourself, showing up as the man she hoped you'd be, with or without her validation. That's not manipulation. That's maturity. That's strength. The man who understands this doesn't panic when she pulls back. He doesn't chase desperately. He doesn't beg for clarity. He stays steady. He focuses on himself. He becomes the version of himself that attracts naturally, not through desperation, but through presence. That's the difference between men who lose women and men who keep the right ones. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a woman fading on you? What stage do you think she was in based on what we talked about? Drop your story in the comments. I'll be reading and replying because understanding these patterns is how we all grow. And if this resonated with you, share this with a brother who needs to hear it.